Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Once again today, President Biden spent the day crushing Republican attacks on Social Security and Medicare. And once again today, House Republicans spent the day getting crushed by Democrats in another one of their fake investigative hearings. The president went to Florida today to remind Social Security and Medicare recipients and future recipients that Republican Florida Senator Rick Scott has proposed repeatedly that Social Security and Medicare be repealed as permanent programs and replaced by temporary versions of Social Security and Medicare that would expire after 5 years. Senator Scott's gentle term for that expiration is sunset. President Biden insisted today that the sun should never set on Social Security and Medicare.
Republicans seemed shocked when I took out the pamphlets they were using about cutting Medicare and Social Security. Read from, Senator Scott's proposal. Read from the proposal from the senator from Wisconsin. They were offended. Liar, liar. I reminded them that Florida's own Rick Scott is the guy who ran the Senate campaign committee for Republicans last year. Had a plan to sunset. Maybe he's changed his mind. Maybe he's seen the Lord. But I know that a lot of Republicans, their dream is to cut Social Security and Medicare. Well, let me say this. If that's your dream, I'm your nightmare.
Yesterday, President Biden reminded voters in Wisconsin that their Republican Senator Ron Johnson has also attacked Social Security. And Ron Johnson did President Biden and the Democrats the huge favor of attacking Social Security once again today.
For the first time around in 2010, I just laid out the reality of Social Security. It's a legal Ponzi scheme. It is. It's truly a legal Ponzi scheme. I pointed out that reality, and of course, I get blasted.
Today was the first hearing of the special committee created by Speaker Kevin McCarthy to showcase the committee Republican Chairman Jim Jordan's recurring performance art as someone pretending to conduct a serious investigation. The Republican point of today's hearing seems to be that government, especially the FBI, exercises too much influence over social media companies, especially Twitter. As authorities on this matter, the Republicans called 3 witnesses. The Democrats were allowed to call 1 witness. The big thinker among the Republican witnesses was a favorite of the Fox Channel law professor Jonathan Turley, who actually said, without any apparent embarrassment, that for him personally, it has become, quote, harder and harder to discern where the government ends and the social media companies begin. Because Professor Turley is unable to distinguish the difference between a private company and the federal government, He spent much of the hearing spinning the absurdist theory that should get an F on any law school exam, that the federal government has been dictating censorship and forcing Twitter to carry out that censorship. That is the word that Professor Turley used repeatedly, censorship. Needless to say, not one shred of evidence of anything resembling what Professor Turley was describing as censorship was presented at the hearing. And Professor Turley got caught by Congressman Dan Goldman in a George Santos-like moment, trying to inflate his resume after Congressman Goldman made the point that Jonathan Turley has never worked in government. Jonathan Turley immediately insisted that he was an intern somewhere in the government way back when, and then he claimed that he worked for the House of Representatives when the Republicans in the House of Representatives engaged him as an outside lawyer. That would be like a lawyer saying, I was a member of the mafia because they hired me as a defense counsel in one of their murder trials. The two former FBI agents both agreed that the FBI field offices in cities around the country are the centers of procedural integrity compared to the horrible culture in the Washington office of the FBI. Never mind that the New York City field office has recently witnessed the arrest and indictment of a former high-ranking FBI official in that office who is accused of taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash while still on the job from foreign sources, and then went on to work for the Russian oligarch who he was supposed to have been investigating while working in the FBI field office in New York City. Neither of those former FBI agents mentioned anything about the integrity of the Boston field office of the FBI, where one former FBI agent was convicted in 2002 for being on the payroll of organized crime and being a co-conspirator in a murder with Boston's notorious Whitey Bulger. The two former FBI agents found it objectionable that criminal investigations of activity that took place in Washington, D.C. are under the jurisdiction control of the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. Neither of the former FBI agents offered one iota of evidence about anything at all to the committee. But they both suggested, in very general terms, that the FBI just isn't what it used to be when they were working there. Former FBI agent Thomas Baker said, things got really bad at the FBI after 9/11, when the FBI's mission shifted into a stronger emphasis on intelligence gathering, which is precisely one of the reasons the FBI pays so much attention to internet activity since 9/11. Today was the kind of day that will no doubt recur from time to time, when the nation owes a huge debt of gratitude to the wisdom of the voters of Brooklyn and the Lower East Side of Manhattan for delivering Dan Goldman to the Congress, and to Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries for appointing Dan Goldman to this committee.
Mr. Baker, I want to turn to you. When did you retire from the FBI?
I retired from FBI employment in about 20 years ago. And
1999, right? It's a year.
Yeah, and I've continued to be engaged with the FBI on a number of levels since then.
Okay. So you retired 2 years before 9/11, right?
That's correct.
All right. And are you aware that one of the reasons that 9/11 occurred was that the FBI and the intelligence community did not coordinate sufficiently? Did you agree with that?
That's a conclusion of the September 11th Commission, and it's very valid, I think.
And so you read that like I did, and that's all the information that you had because you were not at the FBI. And as a result of 9/11, that the Department of Homeland Security was created, right?
A year or two after that, yes.
So you never worked in conjunction with the Department of Homeland Security when you worked for the FBI, right?
I was working as a consultant during most of those years.
When you worked for the FBI, when you were paid by the FBI as a special agent, did you work with Homeland Security?
No, it didn't exist.
Okay. And you never investigated foreign interference in our elections, did you?
No, I personally did not.
And you have no experience investigating Russia's efforts to interfere in our elections through cyber attacks and social media, do you?
Other than what I've studied and researched.
Okay. And in 1999, when you left, did smartphones exist?
Of a sort.
Really?
Yes.
What?
Well, we had phones. We had phones.
Smartphones.
Cars.
Do you know what a smartphone is? Okay.
Well,
did you ever do any search warrants for emails?
Search warrants for
emails?
No, I did not.
Yeah. Did you ever investigate domestic extremism?
Actually, yes. I investigated the Ku Klux Klan on many occasions.
Good.
Did
you ever investigate any insurrections on the Capitol?
No, there was none.
Okay. And I appreciate that your service, sir, but you would agree that a lot has changed in the FBI in the 23 years since you left, correct?
Good and bad, and I have stayed engaged on a number of levels.
One last question, sir, for you. I read that your opening statement is actually an excerpt from your book. Is that right?
Well, it covers some of the same territory, yes.
All right. Well, next time, make sure you give us a heads up and we can set up a table for you to have a book signing after this. Ms. Parker, real quick, do you think that you speak for, you said that Americans are concerned about the FBI. Do you think you speak for every American?
I do not speak for every American, but as a special agent who's been out in the field trying to conduct my job, it's very difficult when we don't have the buy-in of the American people, and a lot of Americans do not trust the FBI anymore because of recent...
Unfortunately, my time is about up, but I will also say to you that I worked in the Department of Justice for 10 years alongside a lot of FBI special agents. And their biggest concern and the most damage to the morale of the FBI occurred after Donald Trump started attacking the FBI because he was being investigated by the FBI. And that is what this subcommittee is all about. I yield back.
It is Friday, the 10th of February of 2023. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Yes, we are, and it is Friday, and we made it. So congratulations. We got quite a weekend ahead of us. It being used to be one of the biggest religious holidays in America, and now it has waned a bit over, well, a couple of decades. But yes, I'm talking about the Super Bowl. It used to be the great gathering of people, and maybe it still is, but I will argue that it's not as shall we say, the coming together event that it once was. Still has one of the largest TV viewing audiences around the world, though I have to also argue probably not as much as when the World Cup happens, but World Cup only happens every 4 years. So there you go. How are you? I think I already asked that. We're going to try to make it through, and we will. Sorry to hear that David is still feeling a bit under the weather there. Said that tested positive again, so darn. Well, I don't know what else. You just got to let your body, you just let it run through your body, run its course, they say. As long as we're all vaccinated and boosted, it alleviates a lot of, well, the more dire consequences of this dreaded disease. But good to know that it's over, huh? A lot of people are still sick. Hospitals are overrun with patients from all, not just respiratory diseases, but they're there. How nice. I just gotta say, I don't want to say I told you so, but these were one of the many, many, many aspects of what we warned would happen because of climate change. I know, it doesn't exist. We're just ultra woke. Jesus. What a bunch of BS. Performative BS. And speaking of performative, we got an article coming up with the College Board in Florida, and sounds, well, I don't know who to completely believe. Ron DeSantis doesn't necessarily engender the feeling that this guy's being really truthful. I think that he gives one the feeling that if he wants to get his way, he'll just get his way. And it looks like it. Oh, yeah. Did you see that apparently he has strong-armed enough people in Florida to take away Disneyland's special government area? Well, it is Fantasyland, ultimately, isn't it? As all contracts are. What's the old adage? Contracts are only made so that they can be broken. Apparently, that's the way of economics here in America. So I just want to understand how that's not an abuse of power. And if someone accused Ron DeSantis of abusing his power, he would say, so what? Because that's the kind of guy he is. A lot more of that southern bigoted racism, plantation landed gentry there than at first blush, so shall we say. His students at that private school said that he was pushing, the whole South was attacked. The South was, being wronged so terribly. And, we're not talking about human beings. We're talking about property. And so you can't really say that slavery's bad because slavery is about property and property is king. Well, just right there, we had a revolution to get rid of the royalty. Makes you wonder how many British loyalists there were back in the day that, said that, the Brits are against slavery. And yet I do understand there were a lot of Brit loyalists among the southern states. Just saying. Well, Elon Musk seems very intent on breaking Twitter. And because of that, I have gone ahead. I know I said I'd be there till the bitter end, and I am. I'm still there. But I did join the whale, Spoutable, and of course the elephant the other day at Mastodon. But took me a bit of... I was actually concerned that I wouldn't be able to get on Spoutable. I thought maybe something's happening. Maybe it's about me. But no, it's a startup, and Mr. Boozy over there is doing a great job. The place looks great. But as you can tell, I was able to finally join, open to the public, all of the rest of us who were a little bit slow on the uptake to pre-register, which would have been, well, I got to say, would have been nice. But I missed that. And so I had to wait until yesterday. They were going to do it on the 6th, but ended up on the 9th because, well, you got to get a lot more servers. I mean, apparently there was a lot more interest than Mr. Boozy or anyone, first understood at first. So, but I was finally able to get on. It kind of cycles a little slow, but that's because a lot of people are joining all at once. I know he tried to throttle how many could join in an hour, but that happens, and that's understandable. And any kind of support that we can give Spoutable over there, Bot Sentinel, we should. And let's make that a viable social media platform too, since, like I said, Elon Musk is intent on destroying Twitter, and he's doing pretty well. Yeah, for a bit there was issues on like how many tweets that you tweeted in a 24-hour period, and apparently 2,400 tweets in a day. And I got to tell you, I never tweeted 2,400 tweets in a month, if not more months, more than a month. So I thought there was something weird, and it was because Musk was messing around with the API. That's right, as we reported and have reported before, and looks like we may report some more in the future. And because of this weirdness, that's really the kicker. I thought I better make damn sure that I got other places to land. And not all of the other alternatives fulfill everything that we were able to do on Twitter. Close, but still not quite. And I think that was the reason, Musk took over Twitter. It's weird thinking that the revolution in Tunisia, I know that's totally changed, but remember that? I mean, Vendor was insulted or told he couldn't do a particular business at a particular area, and he's like living hand to mouth, and he was just at his wit's end, and he killed himself. I think he set himself on fire, actually. Self-immolation. But it was such a jarring incident that it caused a revolution in that country of Tunisia, and they toppled the royalists that were running it at the time. And I gotta say, the person that got installed there is the same old, as we all know from our rock and roll listening days. Here comes the new boss, same as the old boss. And unfortunately, but the point being is that Twitter had a lot to do with getting people out in the square and showing their discontent. And it's been used for any number of things. Crowdsourced research. I mean, that's what the API was all about. That's why we reported about scientists being quite up in arms, because Musk wants to charge for the API. You know, you want to use that, you got to charge. Well, you know, so much for open source. The days of the Wild West are over. I don't know why they call it the Wild West. Open source doesn't necessarily mean it's the Wild West. But it only became the Wild West when all these Nazis and other fascist hangers-on came aboard. Okay. Well, shall we go on more about that? No, we shall not. What we shall do is give you a rundown on what we have in store for you here on this Blue Moon Spirits Fridays at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, as we begin in the Bistro Cafe of said salon. Well, the House Republicans spent yesterday getting crushed by Democrats all up and down the board, and we like that too. Thank you, Lawrence. On the rest of the menu, despite repeated requests, Florida still has not explained to the College Board how its African American Advanced Placement course violates state law. And we'll get into the accusation that it was DeSantis that affected these supposed changes to the board's API or Advanced Placement course. So, moving on, the Ohio Department of Education says it won't do anything about neo-Nazi homeschoolers. I bet they would if there was a Madras involved. Teaching kids how to fly planes into skyscrapers in New York. I bet they would find some way to stop that. And a Nevada company, here's some good news, that recycles batteries for electric vehicles has won a $2 billion green energy loan from the Energy Department. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a joint U.S.-UK effort has imposed sanctions on a Russian cybercrime group. And Greece's parliament has banned the far-right Greek National Party from the upcoming election. They can do it there. We better make sure we can do it here. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. page at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. And the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. Across the page from that chat room link there, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and maybe, how about send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, that helps us pay our bills and all the other costs that arise, because we are running a powerhouse of resistance here at Netroots Radio, and we have done so for quite a few years. And we thank you for your generosity in allowing us to be that powerhouse of resistance as the founders originally intended. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter and Mastodon, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter and Mastodon, and also now at Spottable at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary 10 minutes before showtime. And, of course, that's... And then get that linked up, at least on Twitter. I can do an auto one on Facebook, too. You can also find me at Facebook at Justice Putnam. But I get it on Twitter, and then I have to manually put it on the other platforms like Mastodon and Spoutable now. So bear with me. But you can find those show notes and links on my page there at Daily Kos. And, of course, you know, that's where the full articles are by the actual reporters who reported them. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy's Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life, is by Associated Press staff. The organization that created a high school African American Studies program rejected by Florida said yesterday, Thursday, it is still waiting for specifics from the state about how the course violates state law. The College Board also disputed what it said were Florida's claims, DeSantis's claims. It had deleted 19 topics from the proposed advanced placement course at Florida's behest, saying in a statement online that it already was streamlining topics to fit into an academic year. In a letter Tuesday to the College Board, Florida Department of Education said it was grateful to see that a February 1st revision had deleted the 19 topics, including intersectionality, reparations, and the movement for Black Lives. It also welcomed the College Board to resubmit the course for Florida to review for its 2023-24 school year. Florida rejected the pilot program last month, saying it violated state law and was historically inaccurate. I dispute that, Ron DeSantis. Now, of course, DeSantis, a potential 2024 GOP presidential candidate who has opposed what he calls woke ideologies in schools, said the course amounted to indoctrination rather than education, and you would expect those who have the DNA of the Southern plantation owner would think like that. The state said the course promotes the idea that modern American society oppresses black people, other minorities, and women, includes a chapter on black queer studies that the administration finds inappropriate, and uses articles by critics of capitalism. I just want to know who's indoctrinating who, you little goose-stepping Nazi. I can say that. Last year, the governor signed legislations dubbed the Stop Woke Act. They just want to use the N-word so bad. They really do. And that restricts certain race-based conversations and analysis in schools and businesses. The law bars instructions that says members of one race are necessarily oppressed or privileged based on their race. All right. Can we teach the Jim Crow laws about separate but equal? Can we? The College Board, which said it believes all of its original pilot program had educational merit and which denied any inaccuracies, said it needs more specific information about how any of its course materials are out of compliance with Florida law. We never received written feedback from the Florida Department of Education specifying how the course violates Florida law despite repeated requests, the organization said. The College Board said it would be regretful for any state to reject the course. We believe every student should have the opportunity to immerse themselves in the facts and evidence of the African American experience. Gilbert of Vice News brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. After investigating the neo-Nazi homeschool network in Upper Sandusky, Ohio, the Ohio Department of Education appears to have concluded that the group is doing nothing wrong. Like I said, if this was a madrasa, the decision would be markedly different. Back to the article. Logan and Katja Lawrence were unmasked last week as the operators of a neo-Nazi homeschool network with thousands of members known as Dissident Homeschool on Telegram. And they were exposed by Vice News and the Huffington Post based on research from an anti-fascist research group called the Anonymous Comrades Collective. And how much do you bet Ohio's going to go after the anti-fascist group? Mark my words. The Lawrences openly advocate white supremacist ideologies with the aim of making the children they teach become wonderful Nazis. And that's in their words. Katja Lawrence said she initially started the group because she was having a rough time finding Nazi-approved school material for her homeschool children. And has shared lesson plans that include Hitler quotes, pictures of a cake she baked for Hitler's birthday, and a recording of her children saying Sieg Heil in unison. Days after the news broke, the Ohio Department of Education said that it was investigating the Lawrences and the neo-Nazi homeschool network. Stephanie Sedens, the interim superintendent of public instruction at the Department of Education, told Vice News that she was outraged and saddened by the news, adding that there is absolutely no place for hate-filled, divisive, and hurtful instruction in Ohio schools, including our state's homeschooling community. But, in a new statement of Vice News, the findings from the Department of Education's investigation seem to have concluded that there is simply nothing the department can do or would do to sanction Lawrence's or anyone else doing something similar due to the state's homeschool policies. If this was a madrasa homeschool, they'd be sending SWAT there. Mark my words. While there are certain minimum requirements for home education, the Department of Education is not involved with the excusal of a particular student from attendance in order to participate in home education, the department said. Moreover, the district superintendent's review of home education is limited to ensuring that the minimum educational requirements are met and that the academic assessment report shows that the child is demonstrating reasonable proficiency. Eric Landerverschicht, the superintendent in Wyandotte County, where the Lawrences live, did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the findings or whether the department spoke to him as part of their investigation. The department statement did not reference the Lawrences and the neo-Nazi homeschool network, and instead focused on the homeschooling regulations in the state. Parents or guardians who decide to educate their children at home are responsible for choosing the curriculum and course of study, the statement says. They select the curriculum and educational materials and take responsibility for educating their children. Can't teach the history of slavery in the United States. You can't teach that Roberto Clemente suffered racism in his rise in the baseball world. You cannot teach Martin Luther King. You cannot teach any number of what's considered to be indoctrination, liberal, woke ideologies. But there's nothing they can do about a neo-Nazi. Matthew Daly and Gabe Stern of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. A Nevada company that recycles batteries for electric vehicles has won a $2 billion green energy loan from the Biden administration. Redwood Materials, a recycling venture founded by the former chief technology officer at Tesla, secured the conditional loan from the Energy Department's Advanced Technology Vehicles Manufacturing Program, which helped Tesla more than a decade ago. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm announced the grant yesterday, Thursday, at Redwood's facility in Nevada with Governor Joe Lombardo, where they spoke from a stage to dozens of employees. The region is leading the way to a broader story of what is happening in the country, Granholm said, pointing to a map of 80 battery manufacturing or supply chain companies that are expanding or opening in the U.S. Most have been announced in response to the infrastructure law President Joe Biden signed in 2021 and the climate law he signed last year. Battery recycling will help the U.S. establish its own electric vehicle supply chain, a major goal of the Biden administration as it seeks to move away from gas-powered cars in the larger fight against climate change. Biden also has promoted domestic production of critical minerals used in EVs and other electronics as part of the climate fight and to counter China's longtime dominance in the supply chain. With Redwood and other projects underway, China might be starting to worry, Granholm boasted, and to that I say we are just getting started. The Energy Department said its conditional commitment demonstrates its intent to finance the Nevada project, but several steps remain before officials approve a final loan. Redwood's Material was founded in 2017 by Jeffrey J.B. Straubel, Tesla's former chief technology officer. It now has more than 300 employees who recycle used batteries and has supply contracts with Ford and with Panasonic, which makes batteries for Tesla. Straubel said the company already has more material than it can process from spent consumer batteries from lawnmowers, cell phones, and toothbrushes, as well as production scraps from lithium-ion battery manufacturing. The company says it can recover more than 95% of the elements in a spent battery, including lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese, and copper, The metals are then used to make anode and cathode components for new battery cells. Redwood Materials is expected to create about 3,400 construction jobs and employ about 1,600 full-time workers, the department said. Redwood Materials' history in Nevada started under former Republican Governor Brian Sandoval, who was in attendance. It continued under Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak before the loan was conditionally approved under Lombardo, who acknowledged he was a latecomer to negotiations. The investments and subsequent jobs helped fulfill a campaign pledge by Lombardo and past governors to diversify Nevada's casino and tourism-based economy. All right, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, body horror meets soul horror. When evaluating a film like Infinity Pool or maybe anything from the Cronenbergs, this is the third and first wide release from the younger Brandon, the question you have to ask is whether the violence and gore are in service of some point or aesthetic. A popular theme in cinema and prestige TV these days, think the Westworld series or The Menu, is the depravity often associated with money and power, and what that says about the human condition. In this one, we meet second-rate novelist James and his wife with the money M, Alexander Skarsgård and Cleopatra Coleman, as they're beginning a vacation in a third-world country, which is creepily both tropical and Soviet. We also meet Mia Goth's show-stealing character Gabby, who we first think is buttering James up because she's attracted to him. She may be, but we soon find out that her motivations run deeper. After a night of partying, James and M, Gabby and her husband, leave the compound, running over and killing a local, after which they find out that in that country, the penalty for such a crime is execution or, and this is the flourish that distinguishes this movie, paying to have a double cloned, whom the wealthy culprit can then watch be executed. James is initially intrigued with this custom, which we learn has given rise to a small cult of Westerners who essentially get off on it, staying in country to commit horrible crimes and experiencing the so-called consequences. Way past the bad places where some of the characters from Westworld end up, in the observation of their own torment in Infinity Pool, we have metaphorical baggage aplenty with which to engage, and if you're not squeamish, the over-the-top close-up carnage does drive it home. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean, and there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The framers of the Constitution were concerned about two things. First, the emergence of a tyrannical executive in the presidency, and second, a tyranny of a majority in Congress. So they designed a unique and complicated system intended to prevent either forms of tyranny from emerging while still carrying out the responsibilities of a Republican government. To accomplish this goal, the framers created in the Constitution 3 separate governmental institutions at the national level. They gave each a primary responsibility and the authority and powers necessary to carry it out. They gave Congress the primary responsibility and power to make laws. They gave the presidency the primary responsibility and power to implement and enforce the laws made by Congress. Finally, they gave the federal court system, led by the Supreme Court, the primary responsibility and power to manage disputes over the meaning, implementation, and enforcement of the laws and the interpretation of the meaning of the Constitution. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
When you learned about the killing of Tyre Nichols, were you appalled? And I have a follow-up question.
I'm Lily Ledbetter, and this is a Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
And the follow-up question is, were you surprised? Tyre Nichols died at the hands of members of the Scorpion unit of the Memphis Police Department. Scorpion, disbanded by the Memphis police chief after Tyre Nichols was killed, was formed in November 2021, a specialized squad of some 40 officers mandated to bring down violent crime. There now are many credible reports that Scorpion was operating on its own terms, with residents testifying to Scorpion's repeated acts of physical intimidation and harassment. Young black men were targeted. The city is 65% black, yet according to the police department's own data, 90% of the people arrested by Scorpion were black. And black residents in Memphis were 3 times more likely than whites to be subjected to physical force by the police, 3 times as likely. This data predating the creation of Scorpion. Indeed, it goes back 7 years. A Scorpion tactic: drive up to people on the street, jump out of the cruiser or unmarked car, and engage in the vehicular equivalent of stop and frisk. It is not clear how many Scorpion members operated with these tactics, but clearly some did. Which raises, yet again, the perennial question: who will police the police?
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1971. That was the day that's known in Great Britain as the Battle of Saltley Gate. 30,000 Birmingham engineers had walked out in solidarity with a strike held by the National Union of Mine Workers. The miners were taking a stand against austerity pay. The Salt Lake Coking Works had become the epicenter in the national labor struggle. During the labor dispute, the miners' union and the government had agreed that coal would only go to priority customers like hospitals. But Salt Lake defied the agreement and kept their gates open. A long line of trucks formed to enter the depot. The workers knew that if Salt Lake continued to operate, it would undermine their strike. The call went out for a mass action to close the gates. Between 10 and 15,000 working people answered the call. The Evening Mail described the scene with a front-page story, writing, "Below trade union banners, a sea of faces stretched for as far as the eye could see. And there was a great roar as the gates shut for the first time since picketing began last week." Faced with such a crowd, security workers from the depot were forced to close the gate. The crowd erupted with a cheer. Arthur Scarhill, president of the Miners Union, climbed onto a roof to address the crowd, declaring, "If working people are united, they can achieve anything." The victory was a turning point. A little over a week later, the government had agreed to a pay raise for the miners.
A solid wall are we. Close the gates, close the gates. Our strength is unity. Close the gates. We've marched across the years through hunger, doubt and fears. We are the engineers. Close the gates, close the gates.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 35 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the upper 40s to low 50s, cloudy early, then off and on rain showers through the afternoon. Highs once again in the upper 40s, low 50s, winds light and variable, bringing with it about a quarter inch of rain through the day, then rain showers this evening with overcast skies overnight. Lows in the mid to upper 30s, winds light and variable. Cloudy skies early tomorrow, Saturday, will become partly cloudy later in the day. Highs in the low 50s, winds light and variable, and it looks like we may be having some rain and or snow late Sunday going into Monday. We'll see how that ferrets out. Pollen remains rated none in the little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 23 parts per million. And the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.2 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles. And relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 46 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 50 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 53 and sunny. Kyiv is 30 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 21 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 70 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 38 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 49 and partly cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay and offshore. And New York is 58 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Fatima Hussein of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The U.S. Treasury Department on Thursday yesterday announced a joint U.S.-UK effort to sanction Russian cyber criminals as the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine nears, and Treasury tightens its efforts to financially punish violators of existing sanctions. The U.S. coordinated with the United Kingdom to impose sanctions on 7 people that it said are part of the Russia-based cybercrime gang TrickBot. All members are listed as living in Russia or Russian-occupied Ukraine. TrickBot is named for a strain of Trojan viruses originally used to steal financial data. The viruses have infected millions of computers worldwide, including ransomware attacks that targeted hospitals in the United States at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, UK officials said. In a statement, Treasury said the sanctioned men included developers, money launderers, and a senior figure, Vitaly Kovalev, who it said was indicted in federal court in New Jersey in connection with a 2009 and 2010 bank hacks that predated his involvement with the TrickBot group. The U.S. statement said current members of the TrickBot group are associated with Russian intelligence services, but did not allege the sanctioned men worked with those services. Calling the actions historic, Treasury says these are the first sanctions of their kind for the UK and result from a partnership between the U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control and several UK agencies aimed at disrupting Russian cybercrime.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Derek Gatopoulos of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Greece's parliament has banned a far-right political party led by a jailed former lawmaker from participating in the general election later this year. Parliament published the text of a legislative amendment yesterday, Thursday, that will disqualify the Greek National Party on the grounds that its leader has been convicted of a serious criminal offense. Lawmakers approved the amendment late on Wednesday. Ilias Kazadarias, who founded the breakaway party 2 years ago, is serving a 13-year prison sentence for membership in and being a former leading member of Golden Dawn, a political party of neo-Nazi origins. The court in 2020 designated Golden Dawn as a criminal organization for waging a campaign of violence against migrants and ideological opponents. Kazadarias and other members of the Golden Dawn leadership were jailed as a result of the ruling. The public order minister told state-run television that banning the Greek National Party was appropriate. The government did the right thing by responding to a demand from a vast majority of Greek citizens to exclude a party led by a convicted member of a criminal organization. Elections are expected in April, with the governing center-right New Democracy Party leading but unlikely to gain an outright majority. The likely stalemate is expected to trigger a repeat election the following month, when a new election law takes effect. The party yesterday, Thursday, described the vote in Parliament as a violation of the Constitution and voters' rights and vowed to set up its own unofficial ballot boxes on Election Day. Golden Dawn, a party that held torch-lit rallies and included senior members who openly backed violence against migrants, was represented in Parliament between 2012 and 2019, following 4 consecutive elections held during a major financial crisis. A small right-wing opposition party in Parliament, Hellenic Solution, has also opposed the legislative initiative, describing it as unconstitutional. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.